Welcome to Lionel Nation Part 4.
Everyone loves that clickety-clack of coming down the track. They can't ignore that all aboard and smoke pouring out the stack. Hear that whistle blow as the train pulls out of the station. It's clear to me, oh can't you see, it's a Lionel Nation. Clouds of smoke are rising high into a big blue sky. Down the line, right on time, a train is rolling by. Everyone turns around and stares in anticipation. It's clear to me, oh can't you see, it's a Lionel Nation.
Our train layout stories feature Bill Spalding's scale-detailed Northern Pacific Model Railroad, the military and space display of Jeff Marchant, and the multi-gauge, multi-era collection and layout of David Dansky. We also revisit Norm Charbonneau, who shares some of his secret tips on weathering.
Engine shining gleam, that mighty sound and steam. Pistons pound around and round, just like in a dream. Another train pulls in and arrives at its destination. It's clear to me, oh can't you see, it's a Lionel Nation. It's clear to me, oh can't you see, it's a Lionel Nation.
Other segments include a look at Lionel's post-war motorized units and Lionel's GS4 Southern Pacific Daylight, along with the real Daylight. So let's get started. First stop is Seattle, Washington, and the layout of Bill Spalding. We're in Seattle, Washington, a city renowned for shipping, technology, and coffee. Home of the Space Needle, the Washington Huskies, the 1962 World's Fair monorail, and model railroader Bill Spalding. Bill marches to the beat of his own drum. Most people who were raised on Lionel or American Flyer remain loyal to that brand for life. Not Bill. He changed teams in the early 80s.
See, I got my start in my 5th Christmas with an American Flyer train set. Primarily, there were more people that I had known in the hobby that were in Lionel than Flyer, and plus the price at that time. Flyer was not very popular up here, and so the few Flyer items that were here were, expensive, and Lionel was cheaper, and so that's why I went, and been there ever since. In building this layout, I wanted to incorporate toy trains into a realistic setting and operate toy trains like any hobbyist would do in a model railroad. Hence I have the layout configured so there are passing sidings and we could do way freighting because there are industries and industrial sidings, and so that's was pretty much the philosophy behind the layout.
The track plan is a multi-level main line that runs around the perimeter of the room.
This room is 32 feet long and 13 feet wide. It's basically an around-the-wall layout. You go around it twice to make a full loop with 2 reversing loops in it so that you can change the direction of your trains. Plus, I've got 2 storage facilities underneath the layout where you can make up a train and pull it out. But I've got probably over 350 feet of track on the layout.
In the center, near the control panel, is the yard.
Well, the yard has basically got a passenger siding, and then the main line is for the passenger train, and then I've got 2 additional sidings for freights, just like a real railroad.
When looking at Bill's layout, it's obvious he's an operator. Collectors aren't known for custom painting their Lionel 2343 F3s.
When it came to the railroad, I wanted it to represent the Northern Pacific, which is my favorite railroad, and so there were very few, Lionel made very few Northern Pacific pieces of rolling stock or motive power, and so you had to be a little creative, and so I repainted repainted locomotives, and some of the rolling stock I repainted, and some of it I just weathered, and so I could get quite a fleet of freight cars and passenger cars. And then, of course, as time's gone on, Lionel has come out with Northern Pacific sets that are quite nice. They pull well, they sound neat, and they've been extremely reliable and durable runners. Northern Pacific in the early 1950s was losing business to their competitors, the Milwaukee Road and in particular the Great Northern. So to change their image, they hired the industrial designer Raymond Loewy, and for the exterior of the train he chose the two-tone green color with a white stripe. And it proved to be successful because the Northern Pacific, with their faster time schedule, they saw an increase in their passenger traffic up until the mid-60s, when all the railroads started losing business with the competing airlines.
In addition to the custom painting, Bill has added detailed enhancements to many of his locomotives.
Well, they've got their winterization hats over the fan, and then there are also lifting rings over the hatches for maintenance in the roundhouse. Most of the companies that have reproduced it have either left the Northern Pacific off because it's very difficult to apply the graphics over the grills. Being the way I am, I just put the decal on a piece of plastic, painted it green, and glued it over the vents.
The off-center name on the baggage car is prototypical.
The reason for the off-center was that some of their baggage cars were also water cars. They carried water for the steam generators. And I don't know if it was to identify them or not, but anyway, that was what they did, was they offset the Northern Pacific.
F3s aren't the only locomotives in Bill's Northern Pacific roster.
The Mikados are a relatively new addition to the layout. These are Lionel's baby Mikados that came out 2 years ago, I believe. They are a tremendous bang for the buck. They're nicely detailed, got adequate sounds, and they perform very, very well. As a matter of fact, they've displaced all my post-war steam locomotives. And one of them is numbered 1713, and 1713 happened to be the last revenue steam locomotive that the Northern Pacific ran. The Jeeps are some old post-war locomotives. I renumbered them to the prototypical numbers for Northern Pacific, and changed out the mechanical reverse units, put an electronic one, and they've run really, really well. I mean, gosh, when you consider how old these things are and how much use they used to get in my layout, they've held up very, very, very well. Challenger was the Lion Master that I modified and weathered. Northern Pacific, on their Challengers, put their air pumps on front of the boiler, so it's what I did to that. I made a few other little modifications to it, and it runs real, real well.
The scenery includes small towns nestled among big trees and mountainous regions.
Some of the trees I made myself. Some of them are woodland scenic trees. The mountains are all made of basically out of hydrocal sculptor mold. I used a cardboard armature covered with rigid wrap, and then I put hydrocal on top of that, or need be sculptor mold, and then used acrylic paints to paint it, and ground foam and Woodland Scenics product to give it some texture and vegetation.
Bill uses building fronts as backdrops to create a three-dimensional look in a two-dimensional space.
Well, you have to do something, to give a little illusion of depth. So since this room is so narrow and it's around the shelf layout and I've only got like 2 feet, I wanted to give the illusion that you're looking out into the distance. So I used building flats from various manufacturers, painted and weathered them, and tried to hide the edges and put them up against the wall, and I think it's relatively effective.
Bill uses Lionel signals to indicate the position of switches.
I think I've got 18 powered switches on the layout, is to determine what direction the switch is thrown. So to get around that, we used the 450 signal bridges and some of the semaphores and little block signals to indicate how the switch was thrown for a turnout. Red being that you'd be going against the switch, green being you'd be going through the switch. When we built the layout, I never thought I'd be running it for 19 years or 18 years. I thought we would have moved on by that time and built another one, but it's been pretty durable, and we've had a lot of people through here to see it. A lot of people have been pretty impressed with it. A couple of people don't like the fact that you repaint, Lionel, but as I've told them before, they're my trains. I model the Northern Pacific and not Lionel lines, as much as I do like Lionel. But for the most part, yeah, I think the reaction has been pretty positive. So, it's not your average tin plate layout, and yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was fun to build, and it's fun to operate, and it's operated really, really well for, the last 18 years since I started working on it.
Lionel motorized units are small and not very powerful, but they're colorful, fun to operate, and challenging to collect. Some were based on real trains, and others were designed for play value and whimsy. Lionel introduced their motorized units in the mid-1950s, at a time when Lionel was also downgrading the quality on items like the NW2 switchers and Alcos. Motorized units can be divided into 2 categories: maintenance of way and industrial switchers. Maintenance of way, or MOW, consists of items that are used for track maintenance. Introduced in 1954, the 50 gang car was Lionel's first motorized unit. Few Lionel enthusiasts realize the gang car is based on a motor car used by the railroads to transport track gangs to work sites. The gang car is self-propelled and is designed to reverse direction when it hits a bumper. Needing only a single, independent line of track with bumpers at each end, the gang car could be added to just about any layout. In 1960, a 69 maintenance car was offered. It was basically the same as the gang car, but included a platform for overhead access, perfect for a catenary system. The red 52 fire car is based on whimsy. It not only reverses direction when it hits a bumper, but the fireman spins around in his chair. The fire car also has two outrigger water sprayers designed to extend from the car to simulate putting out trackside fires. The 54 ballast tamper and 55 tie-jector were loosely based on prototypes. The animated tamping mechanism simulates the packing action of a real ballast tamper. This unit went forward only and had a rear coupler for pulling one, maybe two cars. The tamping mechanism was switched on and off when a trackside activator tripped a lever. The tie-jector mechanism was also switched on and off this way. When activated, small wooden boards would shoot out the side to lay alongside the roadbed. These boards represented railroad ties waiting to be installed. The 3360 burrow crane is an accurate model of real burrow cranes, which are still active today and offers the most play value of all the motorized units. It's a fine model, but it's a challenge to operate. The 3927 track cleaning car was designed for fun, not to be an effective track cleaner. But it must have done some good, considering how black the spinning pad and cotton wipers got just after a couple passes. Many real MOW vehicles are designed to run on both railroad tracks and conventional streets. The 68 executive inspection car was one of them. Lionel's model sort of looks like a DeSoto station wagon from the 50s. The 65 handcar is the last motorized unit developed by post-war Lionel. On most of the handcars, the pliable material used to make the two figures reacted badly with the plastic. The result was melting damage on the handcar. But not on all. So if you're looking to buy a 65 handcar, check to make sure the plastic is still intact. Industrial switchers are used for light yard duty and had been in existence on real railroads since the 30s. Most industrial switchers were either diesel electrics or gas turbines. Lionel's industrial switchers, like their prototypes, were designed to pull only a few cars. They came with a small AC motor and 3-position E-unit, but no headlights, horns, or magnet traction. In 1955, less than a year after the Davenport Locomotive Works delivered their first 242 gas turbine yard switcher to the Army, Lionel introduced their model. Lionel also made the 42 Picatinny Arsenal and the 59 U.S. Air Force Minuteman switcher to coincide with their shift to military and space items in the late 1950s and 60s. In 1956, Lionel introduced an industrial switcher modeled after the 30-ton gear-driven diesel made by Vulcan Iron Works. The basic mechanism was the same as the Davenport model, but the body design was slightly different. A decorative bell replaced the decorative horn, and the 3 window struts were replaced by a single strut, which was thin and easily broken. It's rare to find one of these switchers with the window struts intact. Lionel used the Vulcan model to produce 2 snowplows. A wedge snowplow attached to the front replaced the coupler on the 53 Rio Grande. The most collectible version is the Rio Grande with the correct letter A. The version with the backwards A is common. For tougher snow removal jobs, the real railroads used a rotary snowplow. You'll have to use your imagination when running Lionel's number 58 Great Northern model. The 60 trolley is neither a maintenance of way vehicle nor an industrial switcher, but it is still considered a motorized unit. It operates just like the gang car, changing directions as it hits a bumper. The brush plate for the trolley motor is the top of the gang car. There are many variations. Some have a motorman visible in the ends, roof details are different, the body and roof comes in different shades of yellow and red, and the Lionelville lettering is common in black and rare in blue. There are also two kinds of bumpers. The common version is shaped out of spring steel, and the far rarer version is made of solid steel. Today, Lionel's motorized units are highly collectible. The 57 AEC switcher is the rarest of the regular production units, followed by the 42 Picatinny Arsenal and the 59 Air Force models. But the 58 Great Northern Rotary Snowplow is the most sought after because of its visual appeal. The 65 handcar with the plastic base intact is also very hard to find.
Jeff Marchant of South Bend, Indiana, grew up with Lionel trains as a family hobby.
I got started in collecting toy trains and operating toy trains through my father. He has still his original Lionel 1939 train set that he got when he was a kid. And me and my brother grew up with Lionel trains for Christmas, and we had a small layout that grew over the years down in the basement. But growing up, my brother, who was older, had a copy of the 1959 Lionel catalog around the house. And I always gravitated to looking at the Army train set that was in that catalog, and that was something that I always wanted as a kid. Lionel military and space items span the production era from the mid-50s to the late 60s. It's anything from small motorized units to larger items, a locomotive that fires missiles off the side of it, to cars that carry satellites and launch them, and helicopters, to flat cars with rockets, cars that have submarines on them, kind of that whole genre of cars that Lionel came out with to compete with toys that were coming out when Sputnik went into orbit, and the whole toy industry gravitated to the space age, and it was Lionel's attempt to compete in the toy market for the day. One of the military and space items on the layout is the 470 missile platform. It uses the same rocket launching platform as the 6650 car. I've also got the layout on the 943 ammo dump, and that's the one that has the mousetrap-like mechanism in it. So when it's hit by an incoming rocket or missile, it simulates this explosion by the spring mechanism going off inside of it. On the layout, I also have the 448 firing range and the 462 radioactive derrick platform. And one of the favorite accessories for when people come over to visit the layout is the 175 rocket launcher. It's the new production that Lionel did a few years ago, and it has the added features of smoke and ignition lights after the countdown has been initiated. I also have the 197 radar tower. It operates using the vibrator motor. The size of the layout is 17.5 feet by 9 feet. My layout is based on a Lionel D265 display store layout. The size of that layout is 8 feet by 8 feet. Moving into our new home and having much more space, I decided I wanted to build a bigger layout. I still had the design of the D265 in my mind, so I used that as the foundation and expounded upon it to build my current layout. The layout is covered with Homosote and it's painted with latex paints. I had originally intended to go back and cover the layout with ground foam and that kind of landscaping details, but I've had numerous visitors that have come through the layout and have commented on how clean the design is and how clean the layout looks. So I've, for the time being at least, left it as is. The layout features 3 distinct areas. The layout area that's the most prominent is the section with the large mountain. The mountain is modeled after Red Canyon in Utah. I was out on a trip visiting a friend who's a park ranger at Zion National Park, and we were driving over to Bryce Canyon, and on our way we passed through an area called Red Canyon, and we were on State Road 12, and I spotted this rock formation and got out and took a picture, and I hadn't even started the train layout hardly yet at that point. But I knew that was the perfect mountain to put on my train layout someday. The mountain that you see on the layout is constructed out of pink styrofoam. It's just 1.5 inch approximately sheets that are layered together and glued together with liquid nails. Once the glue sets up, you just go back with a rasp type tool and you can carve it. If you want to make more broader cuts in it and ravines in it, you can use a hot knife or just a regular saw to mold it into the appropriate shape that you want it to be. Be forewarned, it is a little bit messy. You'll have pink styrofoam all over you when you get done, but it vacuums up really easy. After that, it's coated with gypsolite, which has an aggregate type material in it, which gives it some texture. And then it's painted with latex paints and earth tones, with starting with your darkest color and then going lighter to give it some highlighting.
The mountain section of the layout includes other points of interest.
There's also a classic 1950s drive-in theater on the layout. There's many cars from the 50s era and the 60s era are in place to catch the double feature for the night. Day of the Earth Stood Still is going to be one of the features for the night, it looks like. The middle part of the layout features a small city. It's just a typical American town from, say, the 1950s. No distinct era or location, other than it butts up against a secret military base. The town features a couple unique buildings. There's a Studebaker car dealership, and there's also a Studebaker used car lot. So it was my way of sort of connecting a train layout that's in South Bend, Indiana, that's based on the desert Southwest to something local to our area. You'll also notice that there's an O'Grady's Tavern where the customers inside are cheering for Notre Dame to win yet another national championship. Well, we can dream, right? In the middle of the town area, you'll see that there's 40 aliens that have invaded. They're from the Toy Story movies. And those actually were a gift to me from my cousin's wife for my 40th birthday. She got me 40 little aliens for my training. One area of interest in the town area is that it's being invaded by a giant robot. And it's a tin toy model of Gort from The Day the Earth Stood Still. Coming to the defense of the town is the U.S. Marines with their locomotive that is about to blast Gort away with their rockets. Even though the layout features a desert southwest motif, you'll notice that there is a Lionel Hellgate bridge. And I just felt that you can't build a Lionel train layout and not have a Hellgate bridge on it. It's such an icon. The third section of the layout is a secret military base. You'll notice that there's no fencing up, but if you've ever heard stories of Area 51, the area is actually devoid of fencing as well, and that's the reason for having it built like this on the layout. The military base features an airstrip and an F-117 stealth fighter is sitting at the ready. On the layout, I have running on the outer loop the post-war celebration series 2383 Super Chief set. It's a reproduction of the 1960 set that Lionel originally made. It was made just a couple years ago, updated with command control and rail sounds. On the inner loop on the layout, running over the mountain and through it, is a Lionel Lionmaster SD90 Mac Union Pacific coupled to a Lionel Lionmaster SD80 Mac non-powered unit. The set of cars behind it are the relatively new Alien Area 51 cars that I've collected. And then on the rear are a few extra military and space cars. The 59 Minuteman switcher train is again a Lionel post-war celebration unit with command control. Behind it are the MX missile cars that the TTOS club produced over a period of a couple years. The 45 Marine engine and cars is again the post-war celebration set that Lionel made a few years ago. It's upgraded with command control and TMCC and rail sounds. There's a special add-on car that features the sound system, and there's also an add-on car that's the Big John cannon car.
Jeff has been very involved in the hobby. He served as the TCA Midwest Division President, where he observed some changes in the market.
The hobby today, in comparison to 10 years ago, I think is much more fragmented. There are many people who are drawn to the scale aspects of the hobby, and there are still many people that enjoy the collecting of the old post-war trains. But it seems like there's a real fragmentation. 10 years from now, I think that the hobby will find itself possibly converging back together as more people that aspire to the scale items also realize that there's a lot of really neat things in the old post-war trains. And I think the layout like I have, it combines both elements, where you can have old post-war toy trains, but have them in a more scale setting.
Filmmaker Orson Welles once called a movie set the biggest electric train set a boy ever had. Jeff likes to think of his train layout as the biggest movie set a boy ever had.
The Southern Pacific Daylight is considered by many to be the most beautiful steam locomotive ever made. The GS4 4449, built by the Lima Locomotive Works of Lima, Ohio, was placed into service on May 30th, 1941. The 4449 headed the famous train that raced along the Pacific Ocean between Los Angeles and San Francisco during the 40s and early 50s. the golden age of passenger travel in America. The GS stood for Golden State, and the train was named the Daylight because it departed early in the morning and arrived before sunset. After retirement in 1957, it was placed on static display until 1974, when it was chosen to head the second American Freedom Train. The 4449 was restored at the Burlington Northern's Hoyt Street Roundhouse in Portland, Oregon. In 1976, the 4449 emerged from the Hoyt Roundhouse in the beautiful red, white, and blue of the Freedom Train. The story of the American Freedom Train is featured in our I Love Toy Trains DVD, Part 12. Now let's jump ahead to the summer of 2009. The 4449 Daylight had once again been painted in the gorgeous red, orange, silver, and black of its original scheme, and was on a cross-country tour headed for Owasso, Michigan, to be the star attraction at their Train Fest. We caught up with the 4449 as it passed through Franklin Park, Illinois, and New Buffalo, Michigan.
This is 4436. Am I clear to pull? Trying to hold our schedule. Over.
Not yet, 4436. I will let you know. Over.
Okay, dispatch. Standing by. 4436. Out.
Lionel introduced their fine scale model of the GS4 Daylight in 2007. They chose number 4436 with a built date of April 1941.
4436, you are all clear. Over.
The Lionel model came fully equipped with the Lionel Legacy Control System, Rail Sounds 5.0, a wireless tether, operating headlight, backup light on the tender, and an adjustable puffing fan-driven smoke unit.
Thank you. Train is clear to move. 4436. Out.
Hey there, folks. I need to see your tickets. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, lounge car is open. All aboard. Ladies and gentlemen, lounge car is open. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Daylight.
This is 4436. We're packing it in for the day.
David Dansky of Ridgefield, Oregon, has been collecting and operating toy trains for 63 years. Many people know David from his toy train heaven ads in hobby magazines. He's been buying and selling trains since 1975.
The first toy train I ever got was in 1946. My father bought me a 726 Berkshire work train, and I remember very carefully the opening up of the box, i.e. ripping it to shreds, which is kind of funny when today everybody is so impressed with having an original box, because I wanted to get to the train. And as I tell people now, when you get a birthday cake, you eat the cake and you throw away the box. Then as I got older, every time I got a little money, I would buy a train and get 99 cents. I could go to Sprouse Reeds and get a plastic bill. If I got $4.95, I could buy a Lionel car. Fast forward to started to teach, got married, got a little extra money. Not much when you're teaching, and so I got into the business of buying and selling toy trains, and that's how I started Toy Train Heaven, and just been collecting trains ever since. I guess I'm an addict.
While most in the hobby consider themselves either a collector or an operator, David's train room is evidence he is both.
Really both, but I think I lean towards being a collector. I mean, I like trains because of their, I think, intrinsic beauty. They kind of remind me of like an Erte Art Deco piece. And to me, they just speak to me the same way maybe even a Chagall painting or an impressionistic painting would. So I like them because of their beauty, their color, and you can see just how pretty really they are. My collection is really an eclectic collection. I only collect those things that appeal to me visually and aesthetically. I have lots of Lionel, I have Flyer, I have Ives, I love standard gauge, I love pre-war, I love Marklin, I love Dorfan. I don't think there's a train set that I don't like, and I've been trying to collect one train set from each country. And recently I found a train set made in the 1950s, and of all places, Bangalore, India. It's not that I just like Lionel, I like all toy trains. I think that's my problem actually, because I don't have enough room to put all the trains in that I'd like to have. Every time I walk in this room, it's hard not to smile. The look, the feel, there are so many stories behind these trains. One of the trains that I own was the train that was owned by Hubert Humphrey, Vice President Hubert Humphrey, when he was a kid.
David's collection spans many eras, includes many gauges from many manufacturers. Among these beautiful trains is a rare standard gauge Blue Comet set made by Boucher.
All of these things speak to me, and I don't care if something is little or if it's really big. It just works for me. The room is a childhood dream of mine come to fruition. We moved up here in 1995. I had this room built for trains. Frankly, I thought it would be big enough it's about 33 by 30. The layout is 24 by 16. I thought that would be big enough to fulfill all of my dreams. How silly I was. The layout is really very simple. I met a man in about 1994 named Al Maris. And after talking to him, I said, you know, if I ever come up here and live up here, would you build a layout for me? I said, I want a simple layout. I am not interested in meeting time schedules and switching tracks and, you know, playing real railroad. For me, my layout is fantasy. You will find O gauge and standard gauge and double O. I also have an original 2 7/8 loop, and you will find all kinds of manufacturers. The basic track plan is a series of concentric circles. I run the trains in opposite directions, and that gives it a real sense of being busy and a lot of action. There's a second level so that I can get a little more perspective in things. Okay, T-Rail was made by Lionel from 1938, I think probably to the end of 41 into 42, so that they could run their full-scale engines. The thing that's really nice about T-Rail is that you can run anything on it, and it runs the modern stuff that's made yesterday, as well as the really old trains. And so I wanted one loop all the way around the outside so I could run the scale Hudsons. So that's the story about T-Rail.
David's control panel is the best organized we've ever seen. It's located in the center of the layout. Access to it is through a drawbridge that uses counterweights for easy raising and lowering. The layout is powered by 5 Z transformers and a modern ZW with 4 power bases. David uses Trainmaster command control in both conventional and command modes to run his trains. He uses the original controllers and switches to operate his many accessories. David runs a variety of trains, and he's not hung up on running strictly catalog sets.
I like standard gauge. There's something about the size of standard gauge. I have to say I'm not a total fan of modern standard gauge, but like, for instance, the Hiawatha set that Lionel made, I think that's great because they did not copy anything from the past. It was something new, and again, if you go back to my love of people like Erte and Art Deco, if you look at that fishtail on the back of the observation car, I mean, that's right out of 1935. I mean, it's great.
Thanks, boss. Glad to have the green light. 3 out.
The Lionel O-Gauge Hiawatha is one of my favorite sets to run. It's a marvelous set that Lionel made a few years ago. Top quality, excellent mechanics to it, wonderful sounds. Now, I personally am not one into all the modern technology in new trains, but in this train, Lionel really got it right. It looks beautiful, it runs great, and it's a point-counterpoint. You'll notice I have the Hiawatha set running in one direction, O-Gauge, and the standard gauge Hiawatha set going in the other direction. And when the two pass, people just love seeing the difference between the two. I also enjoy running a about 58 Lionel Black and Gold Virginian. It's a very special engine to me because I won that in a raffle, not the only raffle I've ever won. I run it every day, as you can see. It's a great running engine. The double motor Magna Traction FMs seem to pull beautifully. My wife, Barbara, loves the trains, and she especially likes aquarium cars. So that is sort of her train, her favorite, with aquarium cars, and that's why I run it every day. The bell ringing switchers, the 622 and the 6220 that Lionel made, only difference really being operating couplers, are some of the favorite trains of most young people when they got them, because the little bell goes ding, ding, ding as it goes around the track. And you happen to put on that train some extremely rare and valuable Lionel cars, and some people would be aghast that I would be running those cars. But again, trains are made to be run. Trains are made to be played with, not just to be looked at.
New York Central 5433, take the green.
5433 Hudson long scale Madison set is a set that Lionel put out to celebrate their 100 years of existence, their anniversary set. It's a beautiful engine, it runs very well, and I like the proportionality of the cars. The cars are basically scale. Most Madison cars, as you know, are short. They're not made, they didn't even want it to be scale. These are scale cars. The engine pulls 7 or 8 cars easily. And again, it's a real favorite of people. They say, boy, that reminds me of the train that Grandma used to take when she'd visit me going from New York to Chicago or Chicago to New York. The Lionel 408 Apple Green set is the second biggest electric that they made. Still quite big, probably weighs about 15, 16 pounds, and it has 2 motors in it. And those 2 motors enable it to pull almost anything. The 408E has lights, directional lights, and has extra trim on it. That Apple Green set is one of my favorites. The condition is extraordinary. Bought it from the original owner, has the diner car, and you can see how nicely it runs. Another set that I really enjoy running is a Lionel 385E because it has a chugger. Early attempt of Lionel to give more realism, if you will, since, as you know, no pre-war trains, none, zero, have smoke. If the train is smoking, it's on fire, and you have a problem. But the chugger was to give it a realistic sound, and some of their top-end sets, that's what they put in. This set has what are called rare transition cars, just like the cars that also Lionel gave to Ives. And it's a very pretty set with maroon roofs and terracotta sides, highly sought after by collectors because it's pretty and you can see how well they run. And then one of the things that everybody really loves is the monorail. That's a 75-foot loop of 1931 Leland Detroit monorail. It's everybody's favorite. They say, oh my, it's just like the one at Disneyland. It could well be, I'm not quite sure about that. But it runs pretty well, and it's impossible to uncouple it or to have it crash. It will not come off the rails. When you get all the trains going back and forth and the monorail screaming over it, it just gives a very, very interesting feel to it. Yeah, if I were a Viking and I believed in Valhalla and I got to take 10 things with me to the afterlife to play with, the door fan crane would definitely be one of them. Most door fan cranes have not survived because of the bad die cast. The metallurgy had a lot of bad zinc in it. This is one of the few that for some reason it didn't warp. And you saw how well it ran. That's all original. Nothing has been changed. Nothing has been added. So I feel very lucky to have one that is still intact, and not only intact, but operates. The Russian train man is obviously like a Lionel 45 gateman. If you look very carefully at it, when the little man comes out, he has a definite Russian look to him, not an American look. That's a very interesting station. It's an old Ives double dome station. That's a wonderful station. The trains go right through it, as you can see, the big standard gauge. And all the little platforms provide a place for the wonderful extras, the people, the baggage carts, the porters, that to me make a toy train layout a lot of fun. Well, if you have trains, you have to have other ways of transportation, and we loved airplanes. We couldn't afford to fly on airplanes, and they really weren't used too much for commercial purposes, at least for the average folk. And I just thought that having various size airplanes over the train layout would just kind of add to the ambience of it. And you saw the one plane that I find really fascinating, the plane that we ran there by J.E.P. Jep of France, made in 1950, counterbalanced on the pylon. And it's very much like the old airplanes that they were going to have when you could fold up the wings, put your propeller on the top of it, and fly to work. I mean, that's the way the propeller is canted that moves the plane around. That's actually the propeller that's moving the plane. There's no mechanical chain or something that brings it around. So I think it's a great toy, and it wasn't made very long. I believe it was 1950, made in Paris, France. Lionel neon sign I got from a train store that went out of business in Oakland, California. And it's very pretty. I probably should turn it on more, but everybody really likes it. I wish it said made by Lionel. It doesn't. I don't know whether Lionel actually made it or the store had it made, but as you saw, the colors are right on. I mean, they're the Lionel colors, so if it was good enough for the train store, it's good enough for me. And when people come into this room, there are 3 words that I hear all the time. Oh my God. They usually throw up their hands and say, wow, look at all these trains. They want to know the history of trains. Young people, when I say young, people under 40, sometimes knew that their father or their grandfather may have had a love of trains. And I call everything in this room BT, for before television. And I used to think it was the greatest thing in the world to be able to turn the lights off at night and have the little tiny light on the back of the 2420 Lionel work caboose that came with that 726 set I told you about that my father got me in 1946. To turn off the lights in the house and have that go around and that little light up the whole room, well, that was thrilling because we didn't have a television set. That was our entertainment. Well, I think the hobby is in a real time of transition. We are desperately trying to show people the joys of toy trains because so many collectors are one generation away from being World War II veterans. And we need a lot of new young blood to become concerned and infused into the hobby so that our joys and our love and our passion will be passed on from generation to generation. Maybe we can engender some interest in this hobby, but with nice videos that you're doing and maybe with the display I'm doing at the San Francisco International Airport.
We featured Norm Charbonneau's incredibly realistic-looking layout in Lionel Nation Part 2. To achieve his realistic look, Norm weathers his locomotives, rolling stock, and buildings. Since Norm's weathering looks so good, we asked him to show us how he does it. The look Norm wants is one of general use, the sense of a car currently working on the rails, not the look of a car totally beat up and ready for the rail car junkyard. Norm calls this functional weathering, a coat of rail grime, soot, and dust. He achieves this by using a general-purpose Tester's Aztec gun and compressor with a high-flow acrylic tip. He uses various colors of polyscale acrylic paint, including rust, grimy black, roof brown, and reefer gray. Norm uses photographs, reference books, and photos off the internet for inspiration. First, Norm removes the trucks and covers them with a light coat of black paint. The idea is to knock the shine off. Then he reinstalls the trucks. Norm uses an X-Acto knife to add wood grain to the tack boards. After adding the simulated wood grain to the boards on both the doors and the ends, railroad tie brown paint is applied with a brush. Then engine black is used as a wash to darken the board's wood grains. Next, Norm applies a general overspray of grimy black on the sides, ends, and roof. This neutralizes the gloss and represents a coat of rail grime. This is followed by a general overspray of roof brown with some emphasis on the trucks and running gear. The wheels and couplers are sprayed with a rust color. The paint is acrylic and dries quickly. Norm slides the doors open to make sure he gets the area below the doors that is covered when the doors are closed. Various earth tone shades contribute to the realistic look, but each color has to be applied judiciously. No color should be used too much. Lighter colors give a sense of fading. Norm uses the rust color sparingly as it has a tendency to dominate. After some final touches, Norm begins to dry brush with a color called reefer gray. It's called dry brushing because very little paint is involved. You dip the brush into the paint, then dab the brush until most of the paint is removed. Then use rapid strokes over the entire car and trucks. Dry brushing is very subtle, but it adds highlights and pops out rivet detail. That's about it. Norm gives the car a final inspection, uses a Dremel tool to remove any excess paint on the wheels, and now the car is ready for prime time on the rails.
By taking an existing locomotive, such as this SD40 made in 1995, and applying additional enhancements on it, you can add a measure of realism to it. If you're trying to replicate what is seen on a real model, your research may include the internet, books, photographs, or perhaps the real thing at a railroad museum. For those who acquire Lionel trains for their collectible value, it is never advisable to make changes to the original piece. The idea of detailing, like weathering, is for operators such as high railers who want to take an existing model and bring it to a certain level of realism. Or perhaps an old piece that needs a complete overhaul is a candidate for some extra creativity. Basic skills in model building, especially patience, are required to complete some of the procedures discussed. Lionel has often molded grab iron details into the shells of locomotives and rolling stock. If your research shows additional places where grab irons can be placed on your model, separately applied parts are available. Many hobby stores also carry the exceptionally thin drill bits used for installing small parts such as these. Before drilling a hole in the cab, use a thumbtack to carefully mark where the hole will go. The grab irons should be painted before installing them. Depending on the specific model and road name of a locomotive, research into the prototype may show the use of special additional safety lights. A Mars light is a unique oscillating headlight that animates a beam in front of the train. Some locomotives have an amber warning beacon on the roof of the cab. Various light kits are available to install on an engine. Various road names had different types of bells mounted on the locomotive. The Milwaukee Road had the bells mounted on the left side of the hood just behind the cab, not under the chassis as it is on the model. An O-scale part can be purchased, painted, and added to the appropriate place on the shell. Some models may require additional paint to better match their real-life prototypes. For instance, The Milwaukee Road SD40s had black walkways. Many locomotives also had the handrails by the steps painted white for safety. It is advisable to remove the handrails before adding any paint to them. A paint marker is an easy alternative to brushes for quickly and neatly adding paint to small areas. Around various points on a locomotive, there may be signs and notations for safety or technical specifications. In your research, you may be able to copy down these markings and create water-soluble decals with a computer program such as Photoshop and an inkjet or laser printer. Some decals need you to spray a protective coat so that when it goes into the water, the ink doesn't run. Blank sheets of white or clear decals for this purpose are available at many hobby stores. The clear sheet is for any colored text that is placed on the colored background of a model, such as black text on an orange body. White or clear decals can also be used to create number boards. These are just a handful of ideas and how to implement them for a specific locomotive. Depending on what piece you may want to add details to, additional ideas for how to do so can be found in books and in talking with other model builders.
Well, time to go. Hope you enjoyed the show.
Everyone loves that clickety-clack coming down the track. They can't ignore that all aboard, the smoke pouring out the stack. Hear that whistle blow as the train pulls out of the station. It's clear to me, oh can't you see, it's a Lionel Nation. Clouds of smoke are rising high into a big blue sky. Down the line, right on time, a train is rolling by. Everyone turns around and stares in anticipation. It's clear to me, oh can't you see, it's the Lionel Nation. Engine shining gleam, that mighty sound and steam. Pistons pound around and round, just like in a dream. Another train pulls in and arrives at its destination. It's clear to me, oh can't you see, it's a Lionel Nation. It's clear to me, oh can't you see, it's a Lionel Nation.
New from TM, Lionel Nation Part 1. Part 1 includes the modern era Clark Dunham design layout of Dr. Theodorakis, the Tom Sefton exhibit at the California State Railroad Museum, and Chuck Brasher's amazing standard gauge collection and layout. We visit Lionel's new offices in New York and their Christmas displays at Macy's, FAO Schwarz, and Grand Central Station. We hear the latest from Neil Young's Toy Train Sound Revolution. Our Then and Now segment compares new scale model versions of Lionel icons like the Hiawatha, GG1, and Santa Fe with their original toy versions. We show you how to add an extra line to your layout, plus lots more. Lionel Nation, 60 minutes of great train action, stories, music, and fun. All aboard! Welcome to Lionel Nation Part 2. We visit Norm Charbonneau's incredibly realistic high-rail, weathered, legacy-controlled modern-era layout. Then we cruise on over to John Potter's colorful, all-original, and mostly boxed pre-war collection and layout. We take a behind-the-scenes peek at a toy train auction and a look at the engines and cars that inspired Lionel's new conventional classics. Plus both the real Excella and Lionel's amazing model in action. 65 minutes of great Lionel action, stories, and fun. Prepare to be amazed. Lionel Nation Part 2. All aboard! Don't miss Lionel Nation Part 3. Stops include Las Vegas, where we show you an amazingly accurate reproduction of Lionel's 1957 Super O showroom layout. We catch up with Fritz Von Tagen in Portland, Oregon. Fritz has built a new train room and a new T-rail layout. Next stop, Dallas, where we visit with Roger Farkash, the main man at TW Design. TW created this incredible, action-packed display Lionel takes to train shows. We'll give you an exclusive behind-the-scenes look at how it was made. We also cover the next issue of Conventional Classics, Lionel's new scale model of the Pioneer Zephyr, plus a lot more. Lionel Nation Part 3. Don't miss it.
Hi everybody, I'm Tom Snyder and welcome to Lionel Train's 100th anniversary. Let's go back to the beginning, to a loft at 24 Murray Street.
The growth of the company, the great job that Joshua Lionel Cowan did starting in 1900, the development of the Lionel trains, the hobby, the marketing, the promotion of it. He was a master at all of that. He was a great innovator. I think Lionel has always been an innovator down through the years. They've done some great stuff.
It's still such a mystery how that old Lionel brings out the kid in me. My Lionel train, my Lionel train. My Lionel train, my Lionel train. One day, many years ago, I remember my first toy train.
What do Frank Sinatra, Tom Snyder, and Mandy Patinkin have in common? They are all featured in TM's new Celebrity Train Layout series.
We have the bumper cars there and the Flying Bobs and the Gravitron.
Every Christmas we got something new. The Bascule Bridge, the log loader, the 397 coal loader.
3 DVD boxed set. Value to $59.95. Sale $29.95. Order now.
Toy Trains, one of the most popular children's series in the country. See Toy Trains, Real Trains, Funny Toy Train bloopers, oh no, and the music of award-winning singer-songwriter James Coffey. 12 shows on 4 90-minute DVDs. Plus the final show, a 45-minute special, and oh no, wall-to-wall laughs and fun. 14 shows, all on 6 DVDs. Awards include the prestigious Parents' Choice. For more information, call 800-892-2822 or visit us on the web at tmvv.com.
It's a wonderful kind of feeling. That's the reason I love toy trains.
Visit our I Love Toy Trains outlet store. We have a fine selection of Lionel trains and accessories, both new and refurbished Lionel from the 50s. MTH trains, track and accessories. One of the largest selection of Thomas in Southwest Michigan. Plus die-cast cars, toys, books, and lots of videos. See 4 trains operating on our 2-level O-gauge layout. Even trains running on the ceiling. We have toys you don't see much anymore. All the popular I Love Toy Trains and Thomas videos. Our store is located in the charming resort town of New Buffalo, Michigan. Stop by. You'll enjoy the visit. We're open Thursday through Sunday, 11 to 5 Eastern Standard Time.